Thanks. As we're trying to keep a bit of a schedule, you guys are certainly very conducive to that, so certainly appreciate the cooperation. I think following up from George's in-depth research and background that certainly drives a lot of the panel that's sitting in front of you. You know, certainly when you see about the number of bulls and the genetic gain, I think we've really been very honored to put together a cross-section of sire analysts that are really a lot of the voice of the companies within the field, in the matings, that make the next generations with a lot of their relationships and with their clients that they deal with on a daily basis. I'm just going to give you a brief introduction, but certainly I've had the honor and privilege to work beside and work with and call these guys friends, and certainly been moved to Wisconsin. I share the same state, and I guess I have to share the same Green Bay Packers with a few of them as well. So, John Schefers on my far left there from Alta Genetics. John and I worked together for a number of years as well. Dan Bauer from CRI up at Green Bay as well, and I certainly have got to know Dan a little bit over the last couple of years as well. Ryan Weigel at Accelerated, and certainly it's a pleasure to be working with Ryan and have known him for a number of years and watched him evaluate cows, and certainly it's his knowledge is very widespread and certainly has a lot of variation with the sire analysts and cow families and cattle evaluations. Lloyd semen, it's always a pleasure to see Lloyd, and certainly when you look at the knowledge that he's brought, and what always is interesting with Lloyd is he always is so welcoming to share his ideas and thoughts, and certainly his experience has been a great teacher for Lloyd, and when you look at the depth of relationships that he's had for a number of years, they're very valued, and that's certainly appreciated by the industry, Lloyd. Paul Trapp, certainly have known Paul for a number of years, and I think we were a little shorter and when we were at Hanover Hill, and certainly had lots of days and put in lots of fun laughs, and it was certainly a pleasure to watch you evaluate the cows at World Dairy Expo last year as well. So certainly Paul. And Brian and I go back a number of years. I think we worked born and raised too far from each other and went through a lot of 4-H programs together, and ended up around the world on a number of occasions as well. So certainly enjoyed the industry and our youth as well, as we grow a little less hair on top of our heads too. So with that, I'm going to start with Brian, and I want you guys to, a lot of these gentlemen don't know who you represent and don't know your scope. So a little background and a little history and some introduction about your company, and particularly maybe the number of bulls that or acquisitions throughout your organizations. Brian?
Well, thank you, Roger, and it's certainly a pleasure to be here, an honor to be asked to be on this panel with this esteemed group of colleagues here. I'll just give you a little background on myself and my employment at Semex. I've been working here now for 20 years. This is my 20th year at Semex. And I've seen a lot of change just in that amount of time. I remember when I first started, my role was to go and picture daughters of the best proven sires. We sold predominantly 95% of our semen from those proven sires. It might even have been 97 or 98% at that time. The only young bulls we sold were probably those from the famous show cows through different programs we had, and we sold a very minuscule amount of young sire semen at that time. And I remember in those days, another part of my role was as a sire analyst. I assisted Lowell Lindsay. He taught me to buy them as cheap as you can because he didn't think any of them were any more valuable than the next one. And it took 5 years to find out if they were any good or not. And that was his philosophy, unfortunately, for some of you in the crowd that have dealt with him. But boy, things sure have changed since then. I don't need to go into detail about that, but at Semex, we've certainly had to readjust and refocus and look at different strategies as we move forward. It's an evolving process and an analysis that continues to take shape. So that's a little bit about my role. I do work in Ontario. I live in Guelph, Canada. I'm responsible for a few states in the U.S., a couple of herds in Wisconsin, and the United Kingdom and Ireland as well. So that is my role with Semex currently.
Thanks, Brian. Certainly lots of global experience there as well, and lots of great history. Paul Trapp?
Yeah, certainly an honor and a pleasure to be here, and I've enjoyed many of the panels and discussions, and the knowledge that's in this room is exceptional. I've been at ABS just over, I think it's 23 years, or starting 23 years. Once you pass 20, I'm not sure you date it or number it any more than that. I grew up in the Midwest in Minnesota, and then probably one of the best decisions I ever made when I went to work for ABS, I took a job starting in progeny promotion or young sire daughter photography and taking international groups along, and I got stationed in California. So when I flew out right after New Year's in January of 1994, it was minus 30 degrees, and I got to California and it was 70 degrees. I was pretty happy with my job choice. So ABS has been very good to me over the years, exposed me to a lot of different aspects. I've seen a lot of different changes. We've had in those 20 years different ownerships, and things have evolved on many of those topics we've talked about. With ABS, we probably sampled as many roughly as 280 bulls, and the age of genomics, we're probably in the low 200s today. So that's a little background on ABS. We have a sire acquisition team that is about a handful in North America and one that covers Europe, and within all breeds we probably progeny test still about 325 bulls in all dairy breeds, and beef and dairy sales last year would have been about 17 million units of semen. So.
Thanks, Paul. I think all sorts of information there, and certainly I think they'll keep counting after 23 years as well, so don't worry, they'll keep track. Lloyd Semen?
I'm a little bit of the outlier here. I'm no longer employed. Ed added in the catalog to put on your favorite baseball cap and show up in Scottsdale. Ed, I hope you're watching. Let's go Cubs. Are there any Cardinal fans in the audience?
Ooh, sorry.
Darn, because it's never in good taste to talk about them if they're not here. I guess I would say that this is an even more enlightened audience than I anticipated. I'm old enough. I farmed for a while, raised hogs, had stock cows, had a dairy herd. Started with an AI company about 20 years ago, actually 30 years ago now, because I've been retired for a bit. And so I'm from Brian's eeny, meeny, miny, mo era when I started, and learned from that if we had second choice, we ended up with the best bull, a better bull than if we had first choice. And I thought we did a little test on that, you kind of keep track. I'm not a statistician, but there are people who are, and I welcome their input. And we started tracking how the bulls turned out, if we had first choice, second choice, or a later choice. Well, it turned out second choice was our best option, so we'd let Paul or somebody else go and have first choice and let them pick, and we'd go take second choice. But again, I think that talks about what genomics can do, and that maybe we trusted our eyes too much in the eeny, meeny, miny, mo days. Again, so I've been retired for about 5 years, 6 years now. Work with some herds, enjoy that. Work with some sales, certainly enjoy the challenges and the opportunities that genomics have brought.
Thanks, Lloyd. Also a great pitch with your ball team as well, so I think they'll be, Ed is certainly here with us. So Ryan Weigel?
Well, good morning. Certainly as both Paul and the others have mentioned, it is certainly an honor to be here with you this morning. There's a lot of familiar faces out in the crowd, and I've enjoyed meeting some new ones as well. My career is similar to the others as how I came into the business and the industry. I have been with Accelerated for 7 years. I've been in sire acquisitions for a little over a year and a half. But I began with the company as a herd analyst mating cows throughout the Midwest. Now I currently cover a lot of the Midwestern part of the United States, a good majority of Wisconsin, Iowa, Illinois, and south on into Texas. Accelerated annually, we bring in about 120 Holstein bulls, and probably around about 160 bulls total when you add the protein breeds that we acquire throughout the year. Just a little bit more background on myself. Prior to coming to Accelerated, I worked with World Dairy Expo, and that's where I've met a lot of you. That was a great opportunity, I had a lot of fun, met a lot of great people in that organization. I also am a breeder of cattle as well. I do have about 150 Holsteins that with another partner. We do a fair amount of exporting of embryos, do try to provide some bulls to AI organizations throughout the world, and that also gives me a little bit of a broad perspective of the challenges that everyone faces in this industry. So with that.
Thanks, Ryan. It's certainly lots of cross-section there, and I think that's certainly one of your strong points that you carry throughout as well. Dan Bauer, calling Lake Mills, Wisconsin home, please.
Yeah, thanks, Roger. And as the others have said, it's a great honor and privilege to participate this morning and attend this seminar. A little bit about myself is I grew up on a small dairy farm in central Wisconsin that milked 100% grade Holsteins. Throughout college, I had the privilege of working on a couple different registered Holstein farms that gave me the opportunity to learn about cattle marketing. After college, I actually was employed for 6 years by the Jersey Association, so that also gave me some additional experience working with another breed and working under the umbrella of a breed association. The last 4 years I've spent in the AI industry, and I am currently employed by Genex CRI, and CRI Cooperative Resources International is a member-owned cooperative. And it's a very diverse cooperative. There's actually 4 subsidiaries that roll up under CRI. Egg Source, which is heavily involved in data management. CLA, maybe a little lesser known, is Central Livestock Agency that works with cattle marketing. A new acquisition last year was Molfa Global that works with advanced reproductive technologies. And then where I currently work is Genex, which is the bovine dairy genetics part of our business. When looking at our dairy portfolio, we're currently actively selling 120 genomic bulls a year, Holstein, and about 30 Jerseys. And actually, the acquisition program itself is slightly larger. We estimate that 25% of the bulls we acquire don't ever hit the market for general sales. And this could be because of poor semen production. As Dan Weigel mentioned yesterday with Saugatuck, some bulls aren't very good for fertility, and so we don't put those bulls out into the market. And also, as been mentioned by George and Brian in their presentations, when we're purchasing bulls out of dams by young bulls, sometimes in the window when a bull's waiting to be released, actually the sire of his dam is starting to add progeny to that proof. So we do see, some slight changes from proofs time to time on bulls we acquire, and sometimes when there's genetic erosion, we make the decision to not activate a bull for general sales.
Good, Dan. Thank you very much. And again, there's lots of different organizations within your company that certainly have a great collaboration within the industry as well. John Schefers-Alta Genetics.
Good morning, everyone. Good to see all the faces out there. Just to give you a little background about myself, I've been with Alta Genetics for 6 years now. Started as a regional sire analyst. I cover everything west of the Mississippi River. I would say the majority of the bulls that Alta procures would be from Minnesota, Iowa, California. And then most recently have a role within our peak female program. So I help manage the matings and the reproduction on the donors that we own. Basically, our team consists of 3 members in the U.S. We have 2 other sire analysts, Mike Menendez and Kyle Demmer. We have our Director of Product Development, Bob Welper, and then our COO, Paul Hunt. And that pretty much compromises our whole team at Alta. We sample about 100 bulls per year. There's definitely been a reduction in size since I started with Alta. I would say when I started at the, start of genomics, we sampled anywhere from 150 bulls, so that's definitely reduced. I guess what I've seen most recently is there's more and more of a trend for these bulls to be actively marketed right away. In the past, we had, run them through a traditional progeny test, kind of program, but any bull that we purchase, we want to market right away. So if we feel that there's no marketability, then we typically don't purchase those kind of bulls. So that's a little bit about Alta.
Thanks, John. It's certainly, I think when you put all this panel together and you can find there's about 90 years accumulative in the AI industry, you can see that certainly there's been a lot of change, and I think these guys are the guys that have adjusted to the change and seen the change and adjusted to it and are ready to embrace the next change as well. And with that, I've formed a few questions for this astute group, and I'm going to work my way backwards this time. I'm going to start with Dan. And Dan, as we've talked about some changes in the industry and how they are, I think one of the unique things that have kind of developed, and some stronger and some differences, is some of the nucleus female programs. For a better word, you can call it your own program name, but nucleus female programs that the organizations have developed or are developing, and I'd like your perspective within your organization. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Roger. And when talking about Gen X CRI and kind of that topic of nucleus programs, I think we're very qualified to discuss them. We have a really deep, rich history with nucleus programs. We hope that many of you would be familiar with kind of our branded female program, Genesis. And what many of you might not realize is actually the Genesis program started in 1989. So it's been in operation for over 25 years. So we've, had a very long-standing female program, and it's certainly evolved over the years. So really with those 25 years of experience in our business model, it's very important that we work with really, really well-managed dairies to be cooperator herds with us. We require those partner dairies to provide the herd management, to get the performance data, to use advanced reproductive technologies to aggressively multiply our elite females. And currently, the program has really grown in the last 5 years. We're currently working with 13 cooperator herds, and that gives us access to over 45,000 milking and breeding age females. So really, really a huge, huge group of females. We're a big believer in that model because it guarantees us access to elite genetics. And one thing that makes us unique is historically it's always been a closed model. We've never looked to market females domestically. And what that allows us to do is we don't have an economic pressure to make high-priced females. We can make matings that are more diverse, or we can focus on singular traits, new or old, specifically to make males for our producer customers. So I think that's one thing that makes us unique. And another thing that we've learned over the years, to make the relationships healthy, we really feel like we need to share the risk and reward with those partner herds. And it's very important that there's no direct competition between those customers. And we think that's kind of the key to keep healthy relationships, in that model.
Thanks, Dan. Well, certainly 25 years. I'm sure you've seen some adaptation and change within that, and certainly your relationships are a key aspect. Ryan, your aspect and your input with Accelerated on that perspective, please.
Sure.
With the female.
On the nucleus programs, most definitely. Accelerated certainly, as we've discussed it in the past, but we currently do not in the future, or do not plan to have a nucleus herd. We rely on you, our producers, to provide us with elite genetics to work with. We are not in the business of sourcing out or owning our own females to make bulls, but rather really want to focus on the elite females that are available to us from the producers to produce the bulls that will be of elite status for us in the future. So kind of a short answer, but without a nucleus herd, that's kind of where we're going to stand.
Well, thanks, Ryan. Yes, I mean, certainly it's a different perspective than Dan, but certainly it's a model that has worked, and it's been in play for a number of years as well. So it's, Lloyd, you've certainly seen some changes and been involved in a number of them as well. Your perspective is important.
Well, and I was one of the people 25 years ago, so history is a great teacher, and I certainly would enthusiastically support nucleus programs if I were still in the AI industry. And I think it stabilizes financial acquisitions. I think that from an internal standpoint, Dan touched on it, and I'm sure all the other fellows will too, that allows you to differentiate with some matings that might be a tough sell on a farm, and I think that's a huge advantage. Again, we're going to talk about inbreeding a little later, and certainly that comes into play. I think the other thing, let's face it, it removes some of the risk for competition among the high bulls. You have some of them from yourselves, and that means you don't. If you're an AI company, you have to go find a bull somewhere, and if you have to get them all outside, well, that's going to be an expensive process, and I don't think there's that kind of margin left in the industry necessarily. The world's a pretty small place and getting smaller, so I think nucleus herds work real well, and the one odd thing I'll say about it, and not odd, but reflective thing I'll say about it, is I don't think you can be naive enough to think that you can get everything out of your own internal program. So you're still going to need to go to breeders. You're still going to need to source females. And again, I think it's pretty important in a nucleus program not to get too full of yourself.
Good. Thanks, Lloyd. Certainly you've seen a lot of change, and you've had deep cooperation with a lot of those breeders that have been successful through the years. Paul with ABS?
Yeah, I've been started buying bulls in about '98, and ABS has kind of always had our toe in the water, or looked across the street to see what the Johnsons were doing, if you will, once in a while. So we've dabbled in embryos. We've had partial positions that had part of that. And never put a huge effort towards us. And then ABS was purchased by Genus in the UK, and Genus had a Moet herd, so they obviously had a huge investment in that herd. After several years of maybe analyzing the data and trying to look at strike rates, we just thought that the strike rate there in that nucleus herd, we weren't getting our bang for our buck. And part of the downside of having a nucleus herd is when you own them, you milk your mistakes. And what do you do with that really good animal out of a bull that dropped or fell? Do you bite the bullet and say, we're going to stick an egg in her, or we say, we can breed it out of her? If you're acquiring bulls from breeders like yourselves, and they change the rules, or a TPI formula change, maybe I'm buying bulls from the left-hand side of your barn, they change the TPI formula, and now we can buy from the right side. That doesn't cost an AIA organization because we don't own the females. So that's some little history of what we've done. And currently, in the last couple of years, we've decided to put a better than a college try for it. We have a full-time position in Susie Martin that's in charge of our female program. We started very slow. It's a very small program, diverse program of what we try to do. We've tried to acquire some females for some of the producers in this room privately through sales at different ages, young calves, flush age, milking cows, and the biggest thing is we're trying to do a diverse portfolio. And like Lloyd mentioned, it's managing that. It's about risk. Some of those matings that we'd like to do on farm or bulls that we think are pretty neat, for whatever reason, that we can't get used. And that's nothing against the breeder, but that's also a risk that the AI company takes, and hopefully you get a reward for that, and that's part of the recognition we've seen in the female program. Our first bulls from our ABS female program will start to make semen this year, and we'll see where it emerges to. It's not going to be the majority place where we acquire bulls, but it'll be a combination, and still work with key breeders that we've done in the past, because like Lloyd says, I don't think you can be near, it's not all going to come from that type of program. Things move and change, more traits come in, and certainly bloodlines and diversity you're not going to have all in one tight-knit little program.
Thanks, Paul, and I think when you take a look at your whole company and a global perspective as well with your relationships within the UK and seeing how they've experienced it is certainly very valuable as well. Brian Carscadden with Semex, what's the female perspective north of the border?
Okay, thank you, Roger. Yeah, that's certainly an interesting and current topic at the moment. Even within our own camp. My wife tells me all the time that you can't make good offspring without a good female, and I certainly agree with that. And certainly we are wary of the fact when you take a snapshot of what's happening in the industry at the current time. There are several nucleus programs in play at the moment. Our access to the elite population is shrinking. The ability for us to have access to all the females we would like to have access to make that next generation of males is definitely shrinking. With that in mind, we are governed by a board of directors. We're owned by a membership. We have yet to enter into the female acquisition Moet nucleus herd sort of scenario at this point, but it's certainly something that's an active topic at many of our meetings. It's an ongoing analysis of the industry and what's happening. Rather than do that, to this point, we've been very successful at creating some very successful alliances or partnerships, if you will, with some very key players in the industry that have been active in acquiring new genetics or very active in creating their own genetics from within. That is the route we have chosen to this point, Roger, and I would say that to sit here and say we'll never have a nucleus program would be remiss for me to say at this point. However, we're not in the female program yet at this point.
Good, Brian. Certainly it feels that relationships and partnerships are always one of the key aspects as you go through the question regarding that. And no, John, I won't forget you down there. So if you give your perspective at Alta Genetics and how that change has been brought forward in the last few years with your female program.
Yeah, so Alta, we started our peak female program back in 2012. That's when we made our first acquisition. I guess at the time, we had a wide net approach. So we would go out to the field, we would genotype a lot of bulls, and from that we would try to, create some genetic outliers. We didn't find that to be a really effective method. We didn't really feel it was a sustainable method over time. Furthermore, we found it very hard to compete, as Brian had mentioned, to get access to the very top females. So instead of fighting for those top females that we didn't have access to, we decided to, start purchasing our own. So currently, it's a lot of work. I'll tell you what. I mean, I have a greater appreciation for what the breeder does on farm, in regards to getting embryos and pregnancies and live calves, because there's definitely a lot more work involved with having your own female program. I am very excited about our female program at Alta Peak. Right now, if we look at the top 100 young bulls on farm, Peak is one of the top 3 prefixes worldwide, so we've definitely had success with their program, and I wouldn't expect that to change.
Thanks, John. Certainly you've been there right from the inspiration of getting that program going, and it's certainly accelerated when you make your alliances with your comparisons within the Peak program. So certainly congratulations. I think there's been a very interesting variation amongst the group with that. I'm going to ask you to hold your questions, and we'll address, even though we have a few more questions for the panel, I'll ask you guys just to hold your questions, even if it's on the female program. We'll bring your questions forward after our initial discussion, if you will. as they went through talking about their female program and acquiring sires, our next question is the use of genomic young sires and proven sires within the industry and within your own program, and how you feel that has changed and what it is currently. I'm going to start with Ryan this time and come this way. And how's that changed, and is it becoming challenging? And even if you want to touch on a little bit of exclusive semen matings as well, or a little bit of how you have dealt with genomic young sires versus proven sires in the field.
Sure, I think that's a good question. And in my short period of time, I haven't seen a wide variety of change into as how much we've used proven versus genomic. But, I mean, genomics is here. It's here to stay. And as a company, in our matings and matings that we've used, I would say we're in the upper 90 percentile of genomic sires versus proven sires. As a sire analyst, I try to work with the dairies as much as I feel feasibly possible on letting them help to make some mating decisions. If there are proven sires that I deem adequate to make some key matings, we will use a little bit of proven sires in those matings. As far as pre-release bulls, obviously those are all genomic, and yes, we're heavy-handed in using that when they're available to us. That changes every day, every week. One of the things I learned when I first got in this, and again, I've only been doing it for a year and a half, I'd get a phone call on the name of a bull and I wouldn't know the bull. Well, that's my responsibility to know that bull, and boy, did I feel like an idiot. So I'm sitting here with my phone as I'm on the phone, or as I'm looking on a computer, okay, who's this bull? And to figure them out. But that's how fast and how rapidly we're changing and going after those genomic young sires. But as far as percentage-wise, really high, really heavy-handed in genomic young sires, and really on both ends, not only the bulls that we're using for the matings, but the majority of the females that we are working with are also sired by those high genomic young bulls.
Thanks, Ryan. And usually when you find that bull, he's about 6 months old. So, and they were wondering where their early release semen is. Lloyd, your perspective on how you certainly have been, through it with 100% proven sires, and how you've seen that change, in the last number of years as well.
Well, yeah, and I'm just going to make a couple of additional comments. I think when obviously you're going to use genomic sires, and should. I think one of the real key things is, and the industry has a little challenge with getting plenty hot on a bull and ignoring the other 25 bulls that are within 20 net merit dollars or 25 TPI points from the one that we're hot on today. And as Brian indicated, well, if you price him higher, well, you're going to use more of him because he's obviously better. So again, I think we run into that little challenge, and so I guess that I'd say clear the genomic bulls, but use a wide variety of them. Don't just get stuck on one. And I'd say that is and I think the other thing is, maybe when you run across the bulls like, just Freddie, Mogul, old man in his day, the bulls that were true outliers for their time, those you use a little longer because you want to get them on a different maternal line than you used them on the first time. And they still have, or different matings, and they still have a lot of pop in their progeny. So I guess that'd be the only odd thing, or, again, I think that'd be my bottom line on that.
Yeah, so thanks, Lloyd, and certainly you've seen a lot of that and how it's developed, and using a variety and the selection as you work with those clients over the number of years as well. Paul?
Yeah, obviously I think everybody on this panel, we've significant amount of genomic young sire usage out there. One of the maybe handicaps that hasn't helping us with proven bulls lately is some of those bulls had some hepatitis or maybe BY or some of those type of things, or calving age issues. So it gets a little challenge to use some of those proven bulls. Obviously, we're very cognizant of proven bulls and would like to use them due to the reliability standpoint. One thing to look at is, if you get some of those outlier bulls, and I think George touched on it this morning, or it was touched on yesterday, is look at if they're sired by a proven bull, if you got those mogul sons, we, get a wide diversity of those bulls and say, well, maybe we want to use a handful of those. Let's use 6 of them and use a little bit of every one of them, and then compared to the next group of bulls that might be sired by a genomic young sire without milking daughters, well, we might have to have the bar a little bit higher for those to use them rather than picking out, using them apples to apples with proven or bulls sired by a proven bull. So, I mean, time marches on. In the female program, I'll go back to that, some of those key bulls, icon bulls or outlier bulls, we have not been afraid to go back and do that mating, or if that's a bloodline that hasn't been tried on that. So on the female side, we have gone back to that in our female program to use some of the proven bulls.
Thanks, Paul. And certainly, when you get challenged and bringing that forward and how that can develop as well is always to move genetics forward as George and the others indicated, and you're closing that to shorten the generation interval, but keep moving genetics forward and how much risk is involved. Brian, and how's it been at Semex with proven sires and genomic usage as well, and if you want to touch on early release semen aspect as well.
Sure. Yeah, I would say at Semex, a very similar pattern. I would say in the past 12 months, our young sire usage as matings would be in the very high 90th percentile. That's not to say we wouldn't use a proven bull such as Mogul, obviously a great bull. However, we have already many Mogul sons, and that's the case with a lot of these graduates that were strong, very popular genomic young sires. We probably already have their influence somewhere in our program already. In saying that, I think we've also have an opportunity to look at bulls that we've used perhaps, when they're 15, 16, 18 months old. Maybe we have an opportunity to go back and look at them again and when they're 3 years old or 2.5 years old, whenever they have some calving ease data or some fertility data. Maybe there's an opportunity to go back and have another look at those bulls. Maybe we don't have enough matings. Maybe we should try and have that influence based on some of that real data coming in from their offspring. As far as early release semen goes, we feel very strongly in the use of early release semen internally. It is like a currency for us, in fact, where we're able to have access to more females when we have that top bull. When we have a bull that the industry wants to use, for example, a bull such as Doors Open was an extremely popular early release sire. I spend a lot of my time anymore answering questions from breeders. Is he available? When can I get semen? Is he made semen yet? He's 2 months old. How early can you get semen? Those kind of questions. We're definitely seeing the data from both Brian and George where the younger generation is where it's at. We're making great genetic gains. I hope Semex doesn't think the same way about me moving forward. However, I think there's a lot of value in keeping that trend moving forward with those gains that we're seeing definitely. We also have some concerns internally as well about the access to early release sires from other companies moving forward. We're seeing the trend towards only sex semen being offered from some of these bulls. It's hard to make a lot of males from sexed female semen. So we're certainly monitoring that situation as well moving forward, and we'll continue to use early release sires as we see them. We feel it's important to use them for 2 or 3 months exclusively at Semex. It allows us an opportunity to build some inventory on those bulls at the same time, so that when we can release those bulls, we have enough inventory that we don't have to overprice those bulls, and that they're available to the market and available to a clientele that can be affordable. So that's what's happening at Semex.
Yeah, that's good, Brian. I think you certainly, you really touched on the early release semen, and you had noted earlier about your female program and how it is challenging to get a female base to work with, and certainly that's one way that you've kind of taken that address, if you will. John Schefers, please.
So right now at Alta, we're using 100% genomic young sires. Although one thing that we keep in mind is we like to look at the genomic risk in the pedigrees that we're using. We, oftentimes look to see if these genomic mating sires are sired by a proven sire or a genomic sire, and we do some, internal adjustments, according to that risk. We also look at interim data. There's a few influential bulls that'll be getting proved soon, McCutcheon and Super Sire. So we can use that interim data to kind of give us a feel to where these bulls are heading based on their daughter deviations. In regards to early release semen, I think we all like to have it, but I think we sometimes use it as a crutch when we're mating heifers out there. Sometimes we don't always make the best matings when we send our breeders early release semen. I'm all for making good matings. Good genetics are good genetics. Just because a bull has been on the block for a year doesn't mean he doesn't have anything to offer. So I like having early release bulls. I think it helps, but at the same time, it's about making good matings, and we just have to keep that in mind.
Valued comments, John. I think certainly when you look at the program and, when you stayed 100%, you're certainly not afraid to use them over a period of time. I think that's an important point to bring to the table. Dan?
Yeah, Gen X, and similar to what others have said, we're nearly 100% genomic usage for mating sires right now. And I guess our commitment is to making the kind of genetics that our customers require. And our current evaluation of the market is that our customers are asking for high genetic levels, and that's the most important thing they want from our product development department. And we feel those young bulls with the highest genetic levels is our best tool, our best vehicle for making the high bulls. So that's really kind of the route we've gone and what we're most comfortable with currently.
Yeah, great. I think that's, a little variation amongst them, but certainly the course of keeping the generations going forward is certainly such key to keep the genetic progress. And certainly you're the end user, and I think that always dictates how the programs go, is how fast the car can get moving as well. So with that, another little bit of direction, I think, is 90 years up here on this table. I'm going to start with Lloyd and ask you for a little advice or direction that for breeders as they're considering continuing or maybe getting into marketing bulls to AI companies. And there's always a new entry, and we always see some new prefixes, some new names on the table, and which I think is certainly healthy. And it's always great to bring that, to continue that forward. What's some of the advice that you would offer and bring forward, Lloyd?
Well, I think a couple things. First off, I don't know if Jeff's here, but they got a heck of an offering tonight at a high genetic level. And the high genetic animals are going to come from high genetic matings in general. And that's pretty well proven. So I think if you're wanting to be in the business, getting into business at the bottom is going to be a long walk. And the people in this room aren't naive enough to think that, I'm sure of that. And probably most of the people watching on the internet certainly not naive enough to think that. So it's a long walk up if you don't start somewhere near the top. I would say that there is an advantage to having more than one cow family if you're a breeder. I think, and again, Paul kind of alluded to it, and so did Brian. The indexes are going to change, and emphasis on traits are going to change. And if you're locked into one specific cow family that does one thing well, you better have pretty good foresight, because otherwise the path to your door is going to get a little scarcer. So again, I think that's important. And we've had, and again, I get the opportunity to speak up here without fear of being fired. So that's certainly an advantage. My wife's not watching, so I won't get fired there. But yeah, I think if you are a breeder and you contemplate an arrangement with a stud or another farmer or whatever, make sure you bargain for yourself. You guys all already know that, but remind yourself of that. They came to you to see if you wanted to participate. Make sure you get your end of the deal out of it. And if they're going to use that wide range of bulls and we know that maybe that success rate won't be as good, get yourself a monthly payment. Don't rely on the bulls that go in to make the wheels go around at your house. And so again, I think there's, and I'd probably add to that make sure you get your use and your opportunity with the females that are generated. Again, negotiate that with them, and I think that can work out just fine. On contracting, if you don't like the mating at all, why just tell them you'll make it and ask them if they want to buy embryos. And if they don't want to buy the embryos, that means they don't, maybe not part of their program, but they also don't think the risk-reward thing's perfect either. And we've had a couple folks that advocated yesterday, and I would advocate for breeders that they use sorted semen. You don't need to flush every heifer. Those 2,300 and up heifers, find yourself a really good high genetic level sorted bull, breed them to have a heifer calf, and you're off into the races. And I don't know, by doing that, we'll probably create a new subset because if you have a heifer calf and you're bred to have a heifer calf, you're going to do a little bit, all the research says your phenotypic results will be a little bit better. So for you research guys out there, why, you can scratch your head over that on your plane back home.
Hey, thanks, Lloyd. It's a good perspective, and certainly you've seen a lot of change, and yeah, I don't think you'll get fired. You'll be fine. So, Paul?
Yeah, I guess, if somebody comes to me and asks, suggestions of what to do or some of those things, I guess I turn around the question and try and find out, what do they like? We've shortened the genetic interval. It's not going to happen overnight. What do you like? What type of cows do you like? And stick to those goals. And then, so once I answer that question, I kind of take it to the next level and, make some suggestions. I think I'm a big believer in knowledge. There's a lot of knowledge in this room. There's a lot of people that know a lot of things. Years ago, that used to bum me out. Monday morning, you get a phone call, and so-and-so had a sale on Saturday, and all of a sudden they'd call you up and say, hey, I bought this heifer on Saturday, and you want to work with her. And I wish they would have called me on Thursday. Because I wish, there's a lot of smart people out there. Ask a lot of questions. If you're starting in the industry and you want to make genomic bulls or bulls for AI, or what's your goal, breed show cows, whatever it is, talk to those type of people that have been successful doing it. Use their knowledge. There's a lot of people that will share knowledge with you, give you suggestions. There's a lot of honesty, there's a lot of integrity, and a lot of breeders in North America, around the world. Access to data. There's a lot of websites out there. Do your homework, I guess, is what I would say, and ask for suggestions from other people. There's the people that are making bulls, own those elite females. That's a shrinking population out there, and I think relationships with key breeders are key for each and every AI stud, more so today than they ever have been, because there's probably less people making bulls.
Yep, absolutely, Paul. And knowledge is power, and certainly trying to get it before is certainly very, very knowledgeable. Brian?
Yeah, it's a good question, Roger. And I think even at this table, there's a lot of people that can lend advice to those looking to not only sell bulls to AI, but perhaps to invest in a new cow family. I think the most important thing for me, when you have a female at home and you're hoping to sell a bull to AI, you need to start with a mating that gives you a chance to get your PA into the area where an AI stud is working, where an AI stud is accepting bulls. It's disappointing for me, and certainly more disappointing for a breeder when they make a mating that doesn't ever have a chance. They spend the money to make the calves, and those calves never have that chance, and they get discouraged. They don't want to do it again. I wish, like Paul just said, I wish they would have asked me before they made the mating. or spent the money to make those calves. I think it's important to use current sires. As John mentioned, it's always important to make a good mating. I believe in that as well. There's several bulls that have been active for quite a while now as genomic sires that are still great options to use as mating sires with everything they bring to a pedigree. I don't think you should be afraid to work with different AI companies. I think it's dangerous sometimes when breeders work exclusively with one company. You reduce your access to those early release bulls from other companies. I think it's important to have as many different options as you can moving forward. I think it's really important to control your expenses. I've seen way too many people buy an animal or start flushing animals and forget about what it's going to cost to mass produce these calves, whether they're doing it through IVF or conventional embryos. Keep that in mind. Know what your costs are going into it. If you have a recipient pool of your own accessible, use it. The live calf programs are expensive. Find what works best for you to make it work and to make it viable moving forward. If your plan is to sell your top females and gain that money back that you've invested, then so be it. If you prefer to keep those females, then you better be willing to absorb the cost of that. It can pay off in the long run. I know there's breeders within this room that haven't sold females at all, and they're reaping the rewards today. It's cost them a lot of money to get to where they are, but their domination of some of the lists is pretty impressive at the moment based on being able to afford to keep those animals within their programs. I think it's important to be careful with fads, be careful with romantic type of scenarios where you think that an investment is going to lead to great opportunities. Be careful. I'll take the polled situation. I know there's a lot of people have spent a lot of money on polled. I think it's a direction we all need to go towards, to that great homozygous bull. But I've seen a lot of people spend way too much money on low-value heterozygous polled females to try and make that next great one. So be careful. As Lloyd mentioned, start high when you go into a lower population like that to give yourself the best chance to make that high next generation. And as Paul and Lloyd both mentioned, be very mindful of the formulas. Know what's happening. Know what changes are coming. Come to seminars such as this and learn from the experts in the room. It's very valuable for you moving forward and for all of us to know exactly what the changes are to any potential formulas. So with Roger, that's all I have for that.
That's very valuable, Brian. You mentioned about costs, and certainly we've seen and we've discussed, that sometimes the initial investment of the female is less than what it takes them to create that few pregnancies that follow in the next few months. So I think costs is always comes into the play. Way down there, John Schefers, please.
Yeah, I guess if I have any advice or direction for people that are interested in marketing AI sires, I would just know your markets, and get specific benchmarks from your AI companies. Each member up here, we all kind of select a little differently. We have different triggers that we have. Ask the people, are there any veto traits, haplotypes, sire calving ease, pounds of protein, because those are some serious traits that could limit a bull's chances of making it into AI. One thing I like to do with my breeders, and I encourage you all to do, is, what's my probability of success if I make this mating for you? Is it 30%? Is it 5%? I think you should ask that to all your AI representatives up here. It's a pretty easy formula, as long as we know the parent average and we know the Mendelian sampling variance for a particular trait such as net merit or TPI, we can give ourselves, a reasonable estimate of what the likelihood of giving a bull that's going to be high enough to qualify. And then I guess finally just ask questions. I mean, you can continually learn. I'm continually learning, and I guess that's it.
Thanks, John. Coming down through there, Dan, I think you've had maybe a shorter time, but certainly some perspective from your past as well.
Yeah, and when I was thinking about this question, I have some background in strategic marketing, and I'd kind of like to maybe use some of those experiences just to share some thoughts. And I think one thing that we're really learning from this event and from the breeder panel yesterday is really how diverse the dairy industry is right now. And I think, when you think about providing bulls for AI, you're really trying to develop products for the people milking cows, the people buying the semen. So I think the first step is know your customer, or identify what customer, what segment of the market you want your genetics to help. And the second step can be is develop a value proposition of what on-farm problems are your genetics going to help that farmer solve. And I think that can be a really key step in developing a vision for your breeding program and finding that niche in the market where your genetics can really stand out. And I think one thing that can get lost sometimes is many contracts reward sales, whether through royalties or volume bonuses. And one thing, when you're looking for an AI partner, I think it's useful to think about distribution. When you look at all the companies represented on this panel, we all have different sales networks, different strengths and weaknesses, different ways of getting the product to the market. And I think it's worthwhile to think about what sales network can articulate the value proposition that I'm trying to develop with my genetics. I think it's a useful thing to think through, because if you can find a company that shares your vision, that has a sales team, trained to articulate the value your genetics are going to provide on the farm, I think you can have a lot of success for your brand. I mean, you're really developing, a brand for your genetics, and I think those are kind of some high-level concepts that are worth thinking through.
Yeah, great insight, Dan, and certainly all kinds of ideas that are interesting to consider when you're looking at that. Ryan?
Yeah, I think if I could maybe just reiterate something that Roger said earlier, knowledge is power. And the things that we learn here today and we learn out and about every day with the people that you have in front of you, be it your sire analysts or others in the field that can help you make some decisions, that knowledge really is power and to help you get to your goals. I think have a direction that you want for your herd and kind of set goals forward towards that direction. I think cow families are important. That's always important to me as I evaluate pedigrees and look through things. I always like to keep mind of cow families and successes, or maybe not successes, that some cow families have had. Don't be afraid to take risks, and spread your risk, I think, are two other good keys.
Yeah, thanks. I think that's with so much power the last couple of days, and I think we're only going to gain on that as we look at all the kind of opportunities as well. So a couple more questions for this group before we open it up to the floor, because I know there's a number of people that are developing some good questions for them. I'm going to start with Paul Trapp this time, and just about the gene pool, and certainly we talked about some inbreeding and outcross and different things the last couple of days, and everybody's got just a little slight difference, if you would, on keeping the generations or the genetic progress. And where do you see that in the scope of the gene pool? Is it narrowing? And your feelings and suggestions?
Yeah, I think some of the statisticians might be better at answering this overall question than the panel up here. Working in the field, and when genomics was introduced, we thought we'd find extreme outliers and more of them, and we found some. Maybe it's kind of like waking up Christmas morning, you're hoping to what's under the tree, and you're not exactly sure until you open the box. And we'd like to find more, and I think that's challenged us to find some of those other ones. And we talked about reliability earlier this morning on some of those traits, and that's still why we need to get those bulls progeny tested so we can adjust the box and we know which direction we're going. And what I mean by that is some of those we get headed down a path and you wonder, whether it's inbreeding or not. And part of our job as sire analysts is not only to just look at that easy number of GTPI or net merit and say, well, that's higher than the next number, but also watch cow families, because some genomics likes what it likes, and some things, conversely, it doesn't maybe like some other cow families. So when that bull or some bulls or some cow families, if you group them together and say, well, they do better over time with milking daughters, that's what we like to do. So when you're out buying bulls or acquiring those genetics from certain herds, you're like, I'll give them a little bit more of a bonus points because I know long-term they've performed well. I guess from a narrowing standpoint as well, I use genomics as a tool and try and look at a group of a cow family and say, okay, what several things do they do consistently well? What several things do we need to continue to watch? Is this a cow family that consistently does type and components, but we need to make sure we always keep in the back of our mind to keep milk bulls or calving ease in mind in some of those. But yeah, I think in general it's narrowing. It was nice to see George's one of his last slides there when you look at the genomic inbreeding actually flattening and coming down. And I think there's more people being more cognizant of that. It was brought up yesterday, the inbreeding tool on Holstein USA. I use it all the time. I think there's a lot of people that certainly look at that and are mindful of that going forward, because at some point, if inbreeding or some of those get too high, the problem in our end of the world is they don't make semen, and that's not going to be a quality product for somebody else to use.
Thanks, Paul. Brian, following on the same gene pool, and you can even, if you feel, if you guys incorporating international sires into your program as well, and has that been accessed, in North America and globally?
Yeah, as Paul pointed out, I do feel that at times the pool is narrowing somewhat. Obviously, with genomics, when you have popular bloodlines, with the multiplication of some of these bloodlines, the popular bulls tend to multiply faster because they're the bloodlines that are used on both sides of the pedigree more often. We are always conscious of it at Semex. We use the inbreeding tool all the time when making matings. I think it's really important. The interesting thing about outcross sires, for me, sometimes it's hard to know what exactly is an outcross sire in the population. Is the maternal side closely related? Is the paternal side closely related? Are they related to each other? To the general population. And it's always a challenge for us over the years when I think back historically when we would go out and purchase bulls that were not related at all to the general population. Generally, their numbers were a little lower, and our membership asked for it, so we entered those bulls into our Young Sire program, and guess what? They were the ones that took the longest to sample. Nothing has changed. The same thing happens today. Those are the bulls we get asked for, but those are the bulls that are the slowest on the uptake through our Young Sire program. Additionally, now through the Young Sire, through our Genomax programs at Semex, we're selling more young bulls at an early age. And that's also true as it was 20 years ago in terms of sales. When bulls are an outcross to the population, sometimes dairymen aren't willing to sacrifice 100 TPI points or 50 net merit dollars to have a different bloodline. Some are, but generally that's sometimes a challenge. The interesting thing for me with genomics since its onset is we thought it would identify a lot of new cow families, and I would say it's been very successful in doing that. We have a lot of cow families that perhaps we knew about but didn't take seriously. Genomics now makes them relevant, and it's taken some cow families and put them in the opposite direction. Some that were heavily used for bull dams, bull families, if you will, and those have certainly slowed down. So I think genomics has been very successful at doing that. When you look at the top female list every month, every week, whenever that is, traditionally over the last 24 months, I would say, and I don't know this for sure without looking, but I'm going to say in the top 25 females, there's always a new female in there that it's a new pedigree, a pedigree we haven't seen before, something different, that genomics has allowed that female to come to the top of the list, and I think that's great. Is it a different bloodline? Not always. Sometimes it is, especially on the maternal side. So outcross sires are something we're always looking for at Semex. We're always cognizant of it when we're making our matings, but we say that with reservation at the same time. We're aware of it, but we're not scared of it. We've had some great bulls over the years that were highly, highly inbred, that were very popular and went on to be very instrumental bulls within the breed for various reasons. Goldwyn being probably the most highest inbred bull we ever had at Semex, maybe in the breed, and arguably one of the more influential sires of the past decade. So with that, Roger, that's our take on it.
I think that's great. I think you talk about, making more prominent families, and as if I just mentioned Dan Weigel's presentation yesterday, hey, the more the test, the more you find, the more opportunities you're going to get. So I think it gives you that opportunity. John Schefers, please.
Yeah, so I think this whole idea of the gene pool narrowing, I guess it's more perception than reality. If we look at the effective population size of the Holstein breed, it's almost double that of the Jersey. So we still do have an effective population to work with. The big challenge, though, is a lot of times we don't want to reach out and grab bulls from other countries, let's say Australia and New Zealand, to use in our herds because we want to use the very best genetics. They're the very best for the reason because they have the most favorable alleles in their gene patterns. So I guess with the topic of inbreeding, I do agree, though, however, it is becoming more and more difficult to mate the very best bloodlines while minimizing inbreeding. If I look at genomic inbreeding levels for some of the matings that I have looked at, it's very difficult to find matings below 10% genomic inbreeding, and you can get a lot of them up to 15%. Well, we know 12.5% is, mating first cousins. So what is the limit? I don't think there is a specific limit for inbreeding. We know it's a fairly linear thing, and I think we get ourselves in trouble by setting thresholds for inbreeding, but there's options out there. There are genetics out there. It's just a matter of if we're willing to sacrifice, the things we're looking for.
Thanks, John. Dan, as we're working our way back here.
Yeah, and I agree with all the comments that have been said. I think where we really feel the gene pool narrowing is kind of what we consider elite. Like if you look at the elite female list or the elite male list, I mean, that's where, as we raise our genetic expectations higher, and our eyes gravitate to the highest ranked bulls, that's where it'll be very common that certain sires and certain sire stacks will show up, over and over. And I think, one thing that John Anderson said yesterday at the pool, and I think it was a really important point, is managing inbreeding is important, but not at the expense of lifetime profit. And I think that's a really, really good comment, that popular bulls become popular because they excel in so many desirable traits. And I think, I really enjoy sorting bulls in Excel, and I'm sure many of you do as well. And I think one thing that happens subconsciously, and a good example is, say, you're making a sort for plus components, high productive life, plus DPR with good calving ease. Voila, you're going to come up with all O-man sons and all O-man grandsons. The same concept if you're sorting for 1,000 pounds of milk, 2 points udders, 2 points feet and legs. I mean, you're going to get a high level of mogul sons. So what can happen is when we set, multiple trait criteria, we can almost subconsciously box ourselves into certain common bloodlines. And at Genex, we're big believers in selection indexes, and many of them have been mentioned yesterday. And one strategy that I think that can widen the bulls we use is to not overreact to singular traits that don't meet our criteria. If the bull is elite to the selection index, I think sometimes it's okay to use a bull that's minus in fat or a little bit lower in feet and leg composite. And that can be a way that we can find some diverse sires that might not get used when we set, multiple trait criteria.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's always bringing the bottom line into it is certainly always a profitability, because certainly the dairymen are going to have those females as well. Ryan?
Well, not to beat a dead horse, but is the gene pool narrowing? Yes, we do believe it is. Are we aware of it? Yes. Are we afraid of it? No. I think it's important to use the tools that are available to you out there on a daily basis. I use a Holstein inbreeding calculator and doing a lot of our matings just to see where we're at on inbreeding, making sure that any suggested matings that are high, that our producers or breeders are aware of those, and making sure that they're comfortable moving forward in using those kinds of those inbreeding numbers. I think George said this morning mating programs. are very important, and I think a great tool for producers to use to help them watch inbreeding. And I think at the end of the day, the market really dictates the bulls we use. Our high genomic bulls are the bulls that everybody's after, and that's what people are buying. And until that changes and someone says a 2400 GTPI outcross bull is okay, then that day is the day we'll go after those kinds of bulls. We do bring some of those in, but it's still the high GTPI bulls are what is a big force in making decisions on what bulls come into our stud.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Ryan. Closing up this question with Lloyd.
Well, yeah, and I think how much effects it's going to have, and I don't know. Who knows? I don't think anybody knows for sure what the narrowing. Certainly, inbreeding's not going down. We're cognizant of that. I would just say that I think we're either incredibly insightful, or we've been a little lucky up to now. And I say that in that. For all the razzmatazz on TPI formula yesterday, why, if you look at Mogul, Robust, and Bookham, they're three pretty good bulls, and they're three pretty good bulls no matter where you're using them. But they weren't terribly related to each other or the population. I mean, Mogul's Dorsey out of a Pret, and Socrates out of an Oman. Obviously, Oman's been in there, but it's been a while ago. And a Planet out of a Ramos. So your first three bulls on that list, and they're the ones that are making the highest ones. I mean, but they're not really terribly related. And so where we go from here will be actually a more interesting question than. And I'm not sure I know the answer to that, whether we're going to be in a Duncan Sooner Beretta conundrum. This is a bigger population than that, but I think in an odd way we've been a little lucky up to now. And I would also, actually I love, Dan mentioned about selection indexes, and I love that there's more than one selection index, because that helps spread out the bulls. Because whether you're in Germany or the Netherlands or Canada now has two, the US has one, USDA's got three of them. If you count net merit and then you do the three sub-indexes, studs are doing their own indexes. Again, I got no problem with that. I think everybody needs to think outside of the box a little bit on this. Breeders are doing, the Andersons, the Bennicks, the Coins, they're doing their own indexes, putting their own priorities on things. And again, I think in a, because not everybody markets their milk the same way. And not everybody markets their products the same way. So I think that helps. But box isn't getting any whiter at the top, I'm pretty sure at that. And we'll have to see. And because I'm not a statistician, I don't have any great answers. I could endorse some line breeding philosophies that really try to fix traits. Mogul sons out of Mogul daughters that are 2640 that are 20% inbred. But only 6.5% bred to the population. Super sires, depending on how he lands here. Again, I think we need to be a little creative on that. And I agree with Brian, because when we've had chances, we haven't been very smart. Sudan was a top 12 or 15 TPI bull. Different as the day is long. I can't remember his sire. He was an Earl out of a Z-bull. Was Sudan's sire. I can't remember the bull's name. He was an ABS bull. And, the next dam was a Sailor and then a Duster. And, you don't see that every day. And he was high production and high protein. Well, so he fit some indexes that were all about that. But I don't suppose that there were 200 Sudans made out of Freddies. And you have to do it a lot. But that would have given us a chance to have a little different bull, even though Freddie's pretty common. But again, I think we have to, when we do run across those bulls, we have to be a little smarter how we use them, not be afraid to challenge them on the spots that they're deficient in, and we can find some of them. But again, the woods are getting a little clustered right now, in my opinion.
Thanks, Lloyd. I think certainly you've seen some programs that have worked with a high percentage and some that haven't had the high percentage that didn't work as well, as you know, sometimes you call them inbreeding and crossbreeding and the effects that they have. Brian, I'll start with you this time and a little bit back to, you know, you guys have covered a numerous amount of information. Cows and heifers, and certainly there's a number of people here that, you know, work with both on their own, you know, facilities and farms and their investment opportunities. What are you guys looking at in the percentages, or are you contracting more heifers, more cows, trying to use a combination of both? And even if you want to tie in, you know, how many of them are by proven sires or by genomic young sires at those stages as well?
Yeah, I mean, we've obviously, I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but we've talked about that younger generation at length here the last 2 days, and we've certainly seen a trend within our camp of heading towards the use of more young, youthful donors, virgin heifers. I would say right now, Roger, we'd be at around 80 to 85% virgin heifers. We still do work with cows. You know, there are certain bloodlines maybe we haven't used enough. Bulls that have been successful, we went back to use their daughters in milking for them. Those bulls are good graduates that we didn't have enough of in the program, or perhaps there's just cows that we really feel strongly we need a few more tries to get some more sons out of them. So we're not opposed to using cows. However, at the same time, we have some historical data over the last few years, and it seems that a lot of the sons we test out of animals that are more than 24, 36 months of age, the success rate, the hit rate has not been very high. So you take those statistics, you look at it, and you think, why would I continue to do a lot of that? But in saying that, we still feel there is a place for those cows. It's a romantic idea to think that all of our bulls could come out of very good two-year-olds that have made a 305-day record that we're comfortable with. It's a great idea. It's beautiful. But unfortunately, we cannot afford to wait that long. We cannot give up that much genetic progress to find out those details. Now, in saying that, it does present some potential problems, I think, for every one of us at the table here, taking bulls in from females that are not yet 20 months of age. They're a long way from having their first calf, a long way from scoring very good, or 79 or 72 or 65. That doesn't enhance a pedigree when you go to sample that bull. We still have a clientele in Canada and around the world that respect a pedigree and the phenotypic data that goes into that pedigree. But certainly the population of users of our young bulls are a lot more accepting today of a pedigree that has a blank or two in that than they would have been 10 years ago, for example. And I think if we're really going to embrace genomics, I think the world is starting to do that. The data's in place, they support it. And I feel that as important as the phenotypic information is on that pedigree, there is a lot more trust in that genotypic value. And we'll certainly need that moving forward when there are more blank pedigrees in the young sires due to age restrictions.
Yeah, it's always a question, you know, when you're talking to a client about a new heifer, you know, what is the pedigree and what is her dam classified, or when will she calve? So it certainly plays into to that factor. John, going down to you at this time with a similar question, and the cows and the heifers and the contracts, and you can even, you know, relate to how that works within your peak program if you'd like to as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say right now within Alta, we're probably about 80% heifer contracts, 10% cows. As most of you might know, is the peak program has a fairly large number of lactating donors in our program. Some of the reasoning behind that is, hey, if they're simply high and they're good genetics, we're going to keep working them, even if we've already made 100 implants or more as a heifer. We see more consistent embryo production in these lactating donors. When you're starting IVF at about 8 months of age, it's kind of a crapshoot to see how they're going to respond. You'll get some that will respond very well, and you get others that, you know, won't respond either. I guess kind of the main thing, you know, when I'm looking at heifers, you know, it kind of goes down to our sire selection as well. You know, are these heifers I'm contracted, are they sired by a proven sire, or are they sired by a genomic sire? There'll be a lot of times where I'm willing to sacrifice on GTPI and net merit, given the fact if that heifer is sired by a proven sire. Because in my experience, those heifers sired by proven sires tend to go down less with time as compared to those heifers that have a genomic sire in their pedigree.
Yeah, great. And certainly your program gives you some opportunity to do that as well. Dan, and certainly you guys have had, you know, a lot of experience with it within house and your relationships as well.
Yeah, and listening to the others, I mean, we'd be slightly different, I guess. We still try really hard, or our team tries really, really hard to put a lot of value on that phenotypic performance when it's available. And in kind of doing the internal research, you know, for this seminar, I was pleasantly surprised that actually 50% of our existing contracts are on lactating cows. So we're still, you know, and that's been the trend for the last few years too. So we're pleased with that. And I guess we kind of justify that with those elite cows, although lower in genetic level, they're still elite for their birth year. So we believe that they still have the ability to make high sons. Now that being said, when we're considering sons for purchase, the sons of cows do have to be genetically competitive compared to the sons of heifers. And you know, when possible, we have turned down bulls or delayed the release of bulls if a heifer calved in and doesn't meet our phenotypic expectations. And one other thought on that is we've seen the trend, and it'll probably increase. A lot of high heifers are getting bred to sex semen now, or flush to sex semen. So that's one benefit for us by contracting a lot of lactating cows. There's some opportunities to use conventional semen and make more bulls, you know, with some high sires that way. So that's kind of our thought on it.
Yeah, certainly it's been working, and your ideas and perspectives are valued. Ryan?
At Accelerated, I think we're close to around 80% heifers, 20% cows, and I think that number was kind of just getting a little bit higher and higher and higher, and now with the influx of a bunch of mogul daughters and milking daughters of other bulls that were high genomic bulls, we've gone back and looked at more milking females than we have in the past. I mean, I think there's still opportunity there on those animals, be it a cow we maybe missed out on as a heifer or didn't have an opportunity to work with as a heifer, and go back and work with her as a young cow. But I want to reiterate just a little bit on that hole in the pedigree, or that blank in that pedigree. And as a breeder, the breeder side of me, I struggle with that. And I think that's something, I don't know if I'm old school or the genomic side or the genetic part of me, it kind of puts you got two different edged swords here as do you really want to use a bull with that hole in that pedigree, but is there the genomic advancement available to you that you can afford to not use that bull? So I struggle with that a little bit internally. And that does make me look at maybe more cows in the future than I have in the past. And I see that number. I don't know if we're going to stay at that 80%, if we'll go a little higher or go a little lower, but I think right now that's probably where we're going to hold.
Thanks, Ryan. Lloyd, your perspective, and certainly you've been active with this, and you know how you perceive it with some breeders as well.
Well, for me, it'd be real similar to the question about genomic sires and proven sires. And I think the industry has run across cows that are as much an outlier as the sires are outliers. And if you have access to one of those cows, you better be getting as much out of her as you can. And you know, if I was still employed and doing it, why, it'd be 80, 85, maybe 90% young sire or virgin heifers. I'd want them out of a variety of sires. I would not want to get boxed into contracting every young sire daughter that was sired by, again, I'd want a wider range of sires within that group. Brian Beneke told me yesterday that there was a 970 some net merit calf, 28, 27, I don't know what, how high, Brian, 28? Her dam was born in 2009. And she's got a bunch of sons that have done real well, and she's been an outlier for a long time. Those kind of numbers, they don't grow on trees, folks. So when you get a cow that can make a difference, why use her? But make sure you think she can make a difference. Otherwise, you go to the heifers.
Thanks, Lloyd. Paul?
Yeah, I guess ABS's percentages would be real similar to the majority up here. We're probably 80% heifers, probably 20% cows. A couple things I would say about, buying bulls out of heifers a lot of times, and you'll see in sale catalogs, we're waiting for information to be added. You might have the bull sampled. She could be IVF at a very young age, and due to her popularity, she may not have calved. So I guess we put a lot of faith in the breeder. It's their prefix on it. I'll ask breeders, what do you think? Would you use them? I put the faith in them and the honesty and integrity of those. And sometimes you'd be surprised, some breeders like, yeah, I'm not sure I'm as comfortable selling that bull. So I put a lot of faith in breeders from that standpoint, because we're not exactly sure what's going to happen with some of those. In our global program, we'll look at female populations, maybe due to some health constraints on a bull, or he died at a young age, or this or that. Maybe there's a certain bull that only had daughters in the UK or in Canada or wherever it is, and we'll look at that female population, and whoever covers that for our team, say, concentrate on particularly more of those than you normally would, so we have enough of those genetics in our program. Also, working with cows, the nice thing about it is you get to use a different set of bulls on them. That's a big advantage of them. You might have daughters out of her that you're working with, and the matron, if you will, and using the same bulls on them can certainly be fun and accessible. I think one of George's sides is you shorten the generation interval and also the age that you're using females and males. The toughest thing is, yeah, we got these high bulls and high heifers, and then when you look at them, they're cousins, and it gets really hard to use them. And before, in the old days, you had that generation age difference of them, and we didn't run into that near as much. So yes, we like to work with females, and also you have some more data on them, maybe their track record of how they've made sons, how they've made females, and hopefully continue to make good matings on the key outliers.
Thanks, Paul. Certainly, we're just kind of coming up with our final questions here to open it up to the floor to wrap up, the AI panel session, if you would. So I'm going to start with John this time, and John, as we've heard about, polled and haplotypes and A2 and different things. I guess I just wrap it up with a little last advice, and maybe with that, what are the challenges, that you run into frequently on the farm when you're buying bulls? Is it health related? Is it young bull care? You can touch on a few of those, those topics, if you will, as we kind of wrap it up before we open it up to the floor. John?
All right, I'm going to be brief on this one. So if I have any, kind of advice, for me, don't be afraid to blaze your own trail. Just because I think protein's important, I think calving ease is important, set your own selection index, or, choose one from the available list, TPI, net merit, or whatnot. But that's what makes this game and this industry fun, is we all have different beliefs. We all have different indexes that we value. So, hey, just because Alta's selecting on TPI, and if you don't believe in TPI, then select for what you believe in. I guess challenges on farm, guess I really don't have a whole lot, Raj. I don't know. All my breeders are perfect, I guess. So, yeah, I'm going to just pass it here.
John's living in a perfect world, everybody. Dan?
Yeah, and I'll follow John's lead and try to be brief as well. The one comment that I would have is just, niche markets are important as an opportunity to generate revenue. But the thing I think that breeders should be careful is be cautious about, flushing or investing in multiplying genetics from an animal that's just not quite high enough. and I've done it too. I own some jerseys, and it's really easy sometimes to say, oh, this heifer is just not quite high enough. Let's breed her polled then, and then the bar will be lower for getting an animal into stud. And I think that can be dangerous sometimes. I think we can compound our mistakes sometimes, and I would encourage people to really, really focus on, multiplying genetics of their highest stuff, and really set your genetic levels criteria high. And if in your breeding program, we talked about the value proposition, if you're, wanting to develop a brand of exclusively polled genetics, absolutely go for it. But it's possible to get ahead of the market sometimes, and I think we just need to be careful, I guess, using niche genetics as a way of justifying, flushing something that maybe we shouldn't be.
Yeah, absolutely. Still got to drive profit. Ryan?
Yeah, I'll stay short as well. I think I've done pretty well at that all morning, but what I'd like to say is just have a direction. Choose a direction that you want to go with your herd, and at the end of the day, you're the one that's going to be milking the cows that we're creating. So you need to do what you're comfortable with. If it's using the high genomics and creating those high genomic bulls for us, that's great. But really have a direction, focus on your own breeding program, what you want to breed for, and then hopefully that's something that we can work with as well.
Thanks. Lloyd?
Well, yeah, and I think at the end of the day, I've always, if anybody's heard me read pedigrees, ever knows that if I would say that if you're going to do the niche market thing, you better be aiming high within that market. That's the only way it'll pay. And I'm kind of a guy that likes to think of the bigger population, and so that'd be the population I'd be trying to satisfy rather than picking small pieces off. Not that there's not opportunities in the smaller pieces, but it's a big world out there, and there's a lot of ways to go about it. And and I'd reiterate what a couple of the other guys said. If your goal is to, I walk in freestyle herds that have just a beautiful set of 2-year-olds, and they've had their own breeding philosophy and done great with it. And do what makes you feel good on that and is profitable. I mean, it has to be self-sustaining, or you shouldn't be bothering with it.
Paul?
Yeah, I'd reiterate a lot of the things that were said. I mean, you have a tremendous amount of respect for breeders around the globe, and especially for those that stick to their goals. Sometimes in this day and age, when you get caught up in the high GTPI, when pre-release was brought up, and some breeders will say, no, I won't use him because I don't like the sire, or a couple things that he does. I never take offense to that. That gives me more respect for a breeder to say, I'm breeding for a certain thing, and he doesn't fit what I want to make. So I'd say stick to your goals, and regardless of what those goals are, if you can be successful, profitable, that is extremely, to be respectful, use the tools you want, breed the cattle that you like seeing every day. I know, when I stand behind a cow in a barn and I'm looking at our mating sire list, which, as we've all looked at, is considerably longer than it used to be. I see a cow for maybe 10 or 20 minutes. I've seen different cows in the cow family for about the same amount of time. I will always give multiple suggestions for matings because I'm not there at 5 in the morning on those cow families, and you've milked them your whole life, and to bounce it off the breeder and say, yeah, I think they do this better than what's on paper, let's head that direction. So I value what the breeder suggestions are and really respect that you guys stick to your breeding goals and they don't happen overnight.
Yeah, that's great, Paul. Certainly you've had lots of international experience with that as well. Brian?
Yeah, really, I don't have a lot to add that what hasn't already been said by the guys in front of me here. But I would echo what Paul just said. I've made a career out of working with breeders in terms of allowing them to work with me to make the breeding decision. We always said it was a mutually agreeable sire that we would use, and we feel strongly about that. We want a bull from that mating, but they're going to be the ones stuck with the females from that mating. And we want to make sure that they have exactly what they're looking for. And I think it is important, someone mentioned blaze your own trail. I think that is very true. I don't think this is a cookie cutter industry. I think everyone's setup is different. Everyone's financial situation is different. And I think you need to look at your operation and decide what best fits you. I'll give you an example of a herd in Canada that's, in my opinion, probably one of the greatest type herds in the world at Bosdale Farms in Cambridge. If any of you have ever had an opportunity to visit there, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. 150 cows, tremendous group of cows phenotypically, tremendous pedigrees, has great success marketing, selling embryos based on his homebred, predominantly homebred herd. They have purchased a few cows in. He, a few years ago, went out and bought a few shottle daughters that were from great families, most of them from the Barbies. That was his first foray into genomics. He wanted to dabble a little bit in it. He sold a couple bulls. But number one, he bought great cows from sires he was comfortable with that were from tremendous cow families. And today, he has progeny, female progeny, from some of these shottles that are his best animals, and he's going to breed from them. He talked to me about getting into a few more genomics. And every time we'd talk about a bull, he wasn't comfortable with that bull. He wasn't happy with having that bull in a pedigree. And I said to him, I said, Ed, you know what? I don't know if this is for you. That is not your focus. It's not what you know. It's not what you do. You've built this beautiful herd based on what you feel strong about, and I'm not sure you need to stray from that. And this year he had the All-Canadian Junior 2-year-old from his own breeding program, and that's their focus, and they're very, very successful at it. And so I think the message in that is do what you're successful at, do what you're comfortable at, and don't succumb to the pressures to do what your neighbor down the road is doing. Do what fits for you.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. And certainly there's some real-life examples there to view that as well. It's not for everybody, if you will, and that best suits your family and your operation. I'd certainly want to open it up to the floor with some questions, and I will ask you to come towards the mic if you could. I think the rest of the room, we can hear you up here sometimes when you speak, but probably the people behind you can't. So I would ask you to just move forward there. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Brad Nosbush, and I told John I'd have a question for him, so I'll give him first chance at it. And, the matings you make today will be making semen 2 years from now, and will have daughters on the ground 5 years from now. So when you're predicting out, you got to predict out 5 to 10 years from now, because you've already predicted out 2 to 5. What do you think the commercial dairymen, what traits do you think the commercial dairymen will be demanding 5 to 10 years from now?
I think that's a great question, Brad. I mean, we could certainly pass it around and start with John if with that direction. I think that's always the goal is what does that, how's the landscape of that commercial dairyman going to change, and what is it that he's going to be demanding? John?
Well, I think based on all this discussion yesterday, obviously we want smaller cows. We want them to be efficient. We want them to, eat less feed and make more milk. You want them to breed back. Basically, we're looking for a low-maintenance cow, so I think really efficiency is key. I know when we look at our large clients, and we talked about this a few nights ago, we have a lot of herds that don't put any emphasis on conformation. We have a lot of our sales from indexes that are 60% production, 40% health, because we're already selecting bulls off the farm. We're kind of filtering out what we perceive as poor type. Not saying that they're poor type, but I guess that would be my response to that.
Thanks, John. Anybody else here? Do they want to have some input with that? I think it's always looking at the crystal ball and trying to get the client's feedback and trying to create that product. Brad, is always the goal. It's what's the car going to be like that you're going to be driving 5 years from now? Is it going to be the same pickup? Is it going to be different? Is it going to have better fuel efficiency? And I think that's what we're trying to do here is predict where that's going to head as well. So, anybody else from the floor? We've covered a lot amount of topics and certainly a lot of information. And George?
I feel I'd be negligent if I didn't ask a question.
Well, you've got these guys all on the edge of their seat up here, I tell you what, so fire away.
Well, with this group assembled, I'm interested to see how the transformation of the breeding industry is affecting the data. So what is your projections on the set programs? Do you see continuing to invest in collecting type data as you have, or do you see that changing?
Probably a little bit of variation. Ryan?
Yeah, I'll jump in first. I think that that's a very important to us, and very important to us to know that information. Something at Accelerated that I feel we plan to continue with.
Great. Paul?
Yeah, we've invested, or ABS has invested heavily in doing set data and continue to do that. I'd say probably the only change that we've made is maybe pull bulls off once they hit a certain number of daughters scored a little bit sooner to save some money on that end.
Yeah, good. Thanks. Anything else from the floor as we're kind of wrapping up? We've certainly, these gentlemen will be here to entertain some more as well. Greg?
Yeah, with the heavier use of young bulls all the time in the marketplace, how many, well, first, I guess maybe an easy question. Do you think there'll be some of these millionaire sires still in the future? Or is there just, once they get proven status, there's just not enough sales in them? And then I guess maybe the second question I'd have is, on that set data, here's what there's an article I just read in Holstein International that, so I have two questions. One's about millionaire sires. Second question, strength as it's evaluated in the field, as it's in Canada, I guess it's called dairy strength. Here it would just be the linear part of strength. It's not necessarily identifying the true strength bulls, the way I understand it. So the question is, are you getting just what you need from the classification that's happening?
Thanks. I think you've certainly touched on a couple different topics. Brian, maybe you can touch on a millionaire sires a little bit. You know, certainly within your organization, you've had some reflection with that, so I'm just going to ask you to maybe comment on that if you would.
Yeah, that's an excellent question, Greg, about the millionaire sires, and it's one of those questions we've all been asking for the last 5 years. What does the future look like in regards to that? Coming from a company where, you know, we've had a plethora of those type of bulls that have had a long career. We currently have our most current millionaire is a bull by the name of Manifold. Manifold's as popular today as he was when he first came with his initial evaluation. His extreme low calving ease and obvious is still very high on the LPI and TPI list makes him popular. Moving forward, it's going to be very interesting to see how that evolves. We're seeing trends within our own company where the young sire usage is improving, or is not improving, but is increasing. We still have many markets. We're at Semex, we sell to over 100 countries. There's a lot of those countries that buy volume, a lot of those countries that will never take a young sire due to legislation or perhaps traditional beliefs, if you will, within that country. So we feel that there's still going to always be a market for those type of bulls, for those volume type bulls. We sold I believe around 12 million doses of semen last year. As we move forward, if we don't have those proven bulls to make that quantity of semen, you know, that's going to be a challenge for us internally to see. It's going to really affect the young bulls that we sell more of now. How long can we sustain their shelf life? Can they be as popular when they're 4 years old and producing 3 times as much semen as they were when they were 18 months old? So those are the questions and the analysis internally that we're going to have to continue to look at as our usage of young sires increases over time. I think there will still be the odd millionaire sire, but I don't believe they're going to be at the same rate that we see them currently. But that semen's going to need to come from somewhere to supply the world market, for sure.
Well, I think it's encouraging and to see a recent entry, Brian. So, John, I'm going to, point a little bit down towards you with this question regarding strength and calving ease and stature. And I know that that's been one of your reflections on a lot of your matings that we've had discussions about. So I'm going to just ask for your comments on that as well.
Yeah, Greg, I'm on the same page as you. I think the discussion that we had is how we measure strength, and in some of the countries it has more to do with body condition. I guess what I found in the matings in the past is there's plenty of, I like to look at the ratio of stature and strength, for instance. There's plenty of bulls out there that gave adequate strength, even though they were coded negative on that. For instance, a bull, Keystone Potter from Accelerated, those were wide cows. He was coded negative on stature, but not as extreme on strength. So I think it has to do partly with their classification system, how we evaluate the trait, and I think we do need to revamp it because our strength measure really isn't strength. You and I know what strength is, but we're not quite capturing what it really is.
Good take-home message. Dan, did you have some input on that as well?
Yeah, and I would even add, and I'm going to cheat from my experience as a Jersey classifier, like strength is a really difficult trait to evaluate because it can be heavily influenced by age at first calving, days in milk, so when that animal is scored makes it difficult to measure, how strong is she really when you have those environmental factors. And one thing I think Don mentioned it yesterday, when we think way back, why did we select for strength in the first place? Well, strength was an indicator of longevity. And, so maybe, we should be putting more emphasis on the animals that truly do last for longer herd lives and just hope that they have enough strength for longevity in commercial environments.
Yep, good. I think another breed perspective is pretty interesting to see how that can be adopted as well. Lloyd?
I think one of the interesting things, Tom Waller did the deal with Braxton, and I don't know the bull that was with him, and where he looked at Braxton and they got mated to daughters that were 1.5 points taller for stature than whatever the other bull was. He was more of a net merit bull. I don't remember who he was. But so and you got the classification program is going to try to address both of those matings when the calves are born. Well, I'll guarantee you they got wider. They got wider. The Braxton's getting, and I remember Braxton just cuz, but it doesn't matter. Could be any bull. They're going to be taller, and because they were bred to taller, wider cows in general, they're going to be wider. Well, that's one of your pieces of the bell-shaped curve, or one of your pieces of the data. And the other bull's probably not, who was it, Tom? What was the other bull? You don't remember either. All right, well, that's good. At least I'm glad that my old age is equal to yours in memory data. Anyhow, there's just going to be that spread. And I don't see a good way to get those two pieces of the puzzle on one data sheet, Greg. I just think when they're bred to be different, they're going to be different.
Thanks. Paul, did you have a couple comments to add
I was just going to touch
either or?
on the first question there on the millionaire sires. ABS has had a number of them as well. I would say a bull stud, those production stalls we have, they're a premium, much like your dairies. And you look at those stalls at a return on investment. So those young bulls, they have the high genetic value or ranking, but they don't make a lot of semen, where we get to the older bulls and they can make a lot of semen. So it's going to be the customers around the world that are demanding those things that will determine how long they stay in those stalls. Also, we're starting to see, from a marketing perspective of these bulls, it's a bit of a challenge. Young bulls that are high, and do you sample them and where do you price them? And then a year later, when they get some real-world calving ease information, some fertility data, and you're seeing different sales trends for these bulls. Also, the good thing that genomics has done is bulls make a lot of semen when they're 3 and 4 years of age. When we used to graduate them when they're 5.5 and 6 years of age, some of them don't exactly start up after being on the shelf for 4 years. So, you know, from a bull stud, we can make those units probably easier at that age group and that 3 to 5 year age rather than the 8 to 10 years of those older bulls. But I think there'll probably be less, but we're seeing different curves or trends of sales of these bulls and their livelihood.
Good input as well. Declan?
Thank you. There are currently some AI companies that are selling female sex semen only on their high genetic merit bulls. How do you see this affecting the genetics industry, and do you see this as a growing trend?
I think they've all had a little bit of input with that. Any comments from this group or following with the uses of sex semen, the challenges that come with it? Pretty quiet group all of a sudden when it comes to that, and they're going to, and I can certainly see their reflection with that. I think it's a good question, Declan, that, you know, a number of years ago we weren't faced with it, and it's becoming a little more, you know, of a challenge, and how we can adapt to it. And without sitting in many meetings with these guys, I can certainly tell that it is a conversation amongst them, and I think they are aware of the challenge and the issues that it could cause, and I know that they're certainly all trying to address it, if I could speak for the group on how that can move forward. So I think you're going to notice some change in that, and it's certainly a topic to be addressed as well. So, Randy? Oh, we got a couple Randys on the go here. So, stature didn't win this time. We went with the shorter one.
Yeah, thanks. I've been taking notes and listening, and the panel is saying that you acquire and market what the customers want. In regards to outcross, as a breeder, I struggle with whether I want to maintain outcross or go with the new trend, the mogul trend, for example, and not have outcross. You look at the bottom line, do you feel there's enough credit given to outcross so we as breeders continue to provide the females outcrossing in the future?
I think it's you know, I spoke with Randy earlier too, and it's, you know, obviously it's got a little spark in them on outcross, and, you know, how much genetic gain is somebody willing to give up, you know, if you will, and in Randy's case, you know, it was herd size as well. You know, I said, you don't get a lot of chances to bat with 50 cows as compared to other ones. So, any comments from the group regarding outcross and, you know, and possibly herd size and variance as well? John, going to reflect you a little bit. You've worked with, you know, and I point you towards John. I mean, you certainly come from, you know, a small, in 200 cows, if I will, and you work with large breeders, and you get asked the question a lot. So you know, I'm kind of, you know, going back at you, but I certainly just feel you come with a little perspective as well. So.
Yeah, Randy, I think it's extreme. You're in an extremely difficult position. I think anytime you try to, I guess at the end of the day, it seems like the AI companies, we really don't reward the outcross genetics at the end of the day. And unless you've got some, you know, royalty-based contract, you know, not trying to steer you that way, but it ultimately has to be based on sales. I guess, you know, we found that people want the best genetics. They're not willing to sacrifice that. You know, I talked a little bit about blazing your own trail, doing your own thing. But it's a tough battle. It's a tough battle for a herd your size. I don't want to discourage you, but I would look to work with partners who are going to value that, you know, that you're going to see some return, you know, more of a return because of what you supplied that AI company.
Good, thanks, John. Anybody else with reflect to that? Randy, did you still, the stature this time will come towards the microphone? Randy, you won out on strength, by the way, because you got there first. So,
wanted to go back to Andrew. I don't know where he went. I lost him here. Oh, there you go. His question a little bit, and kind of open it up to George and Tom and Brian, because I think there's a couple different ways to look at it, and maybe between everybody we come up with something or a start to get somewhere on this. But I mean, we have front-ended capacity on our type evaluation, and we have dairy strength. And as one example, on strength, I think maybe there's a better way to evaluate it than we are. Like, I'll never forget being at Green Meadows and seeing 50 Aaron daughters as 2-year-olds and 50 Durhams. And hey, they weren't coded very high on strength. They were long, gawky kind of 2-year-olds that had great udders, but they had deep briskets and round bones and wide muzzles. And there was other things that you picked up that they were strong, and that as they got older, they were going to get strong. But from the science base, we have to look phenotypically what they look like, what mold they fit into at that age. Are we doing it wrong? Should we be looking another way? And also, are we looking at dairy wrong? I mean, just because a cow has condition at a different part of her lactation, you know, when a classifier may see her, or whoever is evaluating may see her, you know, if she has a buggy whip tail and an onion-skinned udder and just is all that dripping wet dairy look to her, even though she might have put on a little condition, should we still give her credit for that? And should we give these young cows that show that deeper brisket but maybe aren't as wide, but have that, you know, rounder bone front leg and just, you know, nostrils are this far apart? Is that something we should be looking at?
Hey, thanks. Is there any comments from this group? I certainly think there's been some input, and Dan, you talked about classification as well, and Tom, I think if you're looking for a classifier, you should see if Randy's got an application as well. So, John?
I kind of almost look at it at a different way. Are we making too big of a deal about strength at the end of the day? Isn't the ultimate goal how long that cow is going to last? If she's a 10 on productive life, I don't care if her feet are 2 inches apart or 5 feet apart.